So this webinar is funded by the government of Canada in response for the COVID-19 pandemic. It's also part of the efforts we've been doing at CPAC. For those of you who are not familiar with the CPAC, excuse me, we are a membership organization as well as a service provider. We have over 30,000 members, and we have a series of membership benefits, preferential rates for home and auto insurance, credit cards, books, and a number of other things. We welcome you to take a look at our website and join the CPAC membership. Our criteria is very low. It's a bachelor's degree to join. And on the service side, we focus on internationally educated professionals, their career and professional development, mentorship, leadership, learning, and these are the programs we provide. We also have an advocacy mandate. We advocate on issues important to Chinese Canadians and to the ethnic community. Issues on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and human rights. So today's webinar is a part of that effort. When the pandemic hit Canada, we saw a rise of anti-Asian racism. There have been a lot of incidents across Canada. So we designed this seminar series to help the community deal with various kinds of issues. We have 5 topics from racism, its history and forms, to responding to racist behavior, that's tonight, to bystander intervention strategies, and also anti-bullying for children in school. We also have a hate crime webinar provided by the York Region Police. So all these webinars has been listed on our website, and we welcome you to register for each of them. And at the end of the series, we will post the recording online, so you'll have a chance to see it again if you want. Now tonight, we are very fortunate to have an expert from Montreal, because all our speakers are pretty much from out of town, from Calgary, Kingston, Montreal, San Francisco, because we have searched all over North America to find the people who are most experienced in the field. And tonight's speaker is Phu Nimi. Phu is a very well-known advocate for human rights and equity and justice in Canada. And he's been in this field for a few decades. Phu is currently the executive director of the Montreal-based Center for Research Action on Race Relations. And apart from his day job, he has been on a lot of board and held various prestigious positions, including positions with the Quebec government, the Montreal government, and he has also been an advisor to the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, the Canadian, a member of the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, and an advisor to the Canadian Broadcast Standards Council, and a number of other organizations. So throughout his career, he has received numerous honors and awards, and 2 of them are very well known. One is the Quebec Justice Award, and the other one is the Human Rights Award, conferred by the Lord Reading Law Society, which is a Jewish bar in Montreal. And Phu has been working with real-life cases of people in Montreal, and tonight we're going to hear him talking about many of such cases. And also at the end of the webinar, we'll have a time for question and answers, where you can ask him any questions. You can type in through the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and you can type in English or in Chinese, and we'll pose the question to Phu. So with that, I ask Phu to start. So,
Well, thank you very much, Andy. I would like to thank you again for inviting me to be part of this educational activity. I would like to thank everyone participating tonight. I'm going to speak slow, but sometimes when I get carried away or I become very, very passionate, if I speak too fast, please slow me down. I would like to talk to you tonight about how to deal with racist behaviors, how to deal with racism, especially when it's very open and explicit, and it's what we call it in your face. Um, One of the things that I would like to talk about is we talk often about racist behaviors, and I would like to perhaps explain what they are. There are usually different kinds of racist behaviors. The two that we are most sort of commonly identified. The first is when it's any behavior or conduct or action that are open, that are explicit, straight in your face, and it's intentional. For example, insults, assaults, jokes, vandalism to your property, threats, harassment, and things like that. There's another kind of racist behavior which is more common and more people experience them, but often people don't realize they are racist behaviors because they tend to be more subtle, silent, they're very polite. Um, for example, when you work in at work and you don't get to be invited out to socialize with your to white colleagues or colleagues of other backgrounds. For sometimes in school you tend to be picked on. You're being to be under scrutiny because of your background, because you're Chinese. For example, as a more subtle and polite form of racist behavior in the world of science and in academia is this kind of sometimes a thought in a lot of people's mind, a suspicion that because you're from China, if you're a scientist, you must be involved in some sort of spying for the Chinese government. And that's a stereotype that is very subtle. It's very, very, shall we say, sometimes it's unspoken, but it's in the minds of a lot of people. And sometimes the stereotype comes out in words, in other ways, and you can feel it that you're being treated unfairly or are you being evaluated unfairly. And that's what we call in Canada a form of polite racism. So racist behavior comes in different ways. In my work with people who are victims of discrimination, over the last 20 years, I have had more than, I would say, 1,000 or 1,500 people who have come to us for help. Chinese and Asian people are very few among the people who come to us for help. So often we ask ourselves, why are there so few Asian people, so few Chinese people coming to see us about racism, about racial discrimination? We can say that maybe because they are not discriminated against. But in our experience, in the work that we do with different communities, whether they be Chinese, Filipinos, Vietnamese, Cambodians, or Korean or Japanese Canadians, there is this one thing that we note that a lot of people do experience racism, whether they do experience racist behaviors, whether they are explicit or they are more subtle and silent and polite. But the thing is, very few people do something about it. So I'd like to feature some of the examples of cases that we've worked on. Some are not known, some are more well known to you because very likely you have experienced them. And I would like to know whether you have experience and how you relate to this kind of situation that has happened in the past. Or you may still see it even as today. The first example is being harassed on the bus. We have people who've called us, especially in recent months, going to taking the metro getting on the bus or the suburban train and get insulted, sometimes with jokes, sometimes with open insults. And usually young men tend to do this kind of insults, and you're insulted, sometimes you feel threatened, and you're almost alone on the bus. And what do you do? That's a kind of example that we have, and usually what we tell people is, if this happens to you on the bus, don't talk back, don't react to racist jokes and insults, but just try, if possible, move away or go towards the driver and report it to the driver so that the bus driver will decide what to do. The best advice we can give to you is, don't do anything that can make your harasser become more aggressive, and even to the point of being more verbally or even physically violent. So they can push you, it can assault you, it can beat you, but sometimes the quiet walking away and going up to the driver is the better way to handle it. Another example that I see, actually it's a little bit more, something that happens is that, there's a lot of medical clinics, private medical clinics, and a Chinese doctor can be very available to, to serve new patients, and then a new patient refuses to let him see her because she openly asked the clinic to give her another doctor, because this doctor is Chinese and she feels that she may catch COVID-19 from this doctor. So if you're a doctor, if you're a healthcare professional, if you're a nurse working in a medical clinic, what do you do when you see a patient being openly, I just say racist, but being polite? She doesn't have any aggressive behaviors towards you. She doesn't seem to dislike you. She's just concerned that being served by a Chinese doctor, or can be a Chinese nurse, can give her COVID-19. And that's because of the association of COVID-19 with first with China, then with communist China, and then with all Chinese people or people who look Chinese. So what do you do? If you are a doctor, if you're a healthcare professional in that clinic, or if you're a manager of a clinic, you have a chat with this patient. And the rule is, you can explain to the patient what the science is about, what COVID-19 is all about, what anti-Chinese stereotype about COVID-19 is about, and then you let the patient decide. Either you see this doctor because this could be one of the best doctors who can give you the best medical care and advice, or sorry, you can go to another medical clinic, because as a clinic, nobody should condone or allow racial discrimination to take place. No doctor or healthcare professional should be treated as if a person spreads COVID-19 because that's the racist stereotype. And no patient should be allowed to have his or her racist opinions or racist conduct tolerated in such a manner. This is another case of example of racist behaviors that we have worked on. As a matter of fact, it took a lot of years. The case went to the Quebec Human Rights Tribunal, and then it went all the way up to the Court of Appeal of the province of Quebec. It's called the Caligo case. The Caligo is the name of the company. And this is an example where one day we had a group of almost a dozen Chinese workers coming to see us and say that they work, it's a manufacturing plant. They work in an area where there were a lot of new Chinese immigrants and Filipino, Indian workers, but the boss specifically singled out Chinese workers and blamed them for unsanitary conditions in the kitchen and in the toilet. Basically blaming it, saying that you're not in China anymore. Every day you have to take a shower, you have to be clean, you have to know how to eat and how to wash your dishes so that you don't clog up my kitchen. Anyway, he made a lot of assumptions about Chinese people, and this is Chinese workers. And one day he rounded up all the Chinese workers in a public meeting, and he lectured them about how to be clean and keep the place clean. So what happened? Many Chinese workers sat there in silence and didn't do anything or say anything because they were afraid about their jobs. Many people stood up, talked back, threw back the insult at the boss, calling him racist, and walked out of the protest. Some quit their job because they say that even if we do minimum wage, we cannot allow ourselves to be insulted and to be treated in such a racist manner. So there were only in the end about a dozen workers who decided to stand up and take the boss and the company to the Human Rights Commission. And we supported them. The legal battle went on for 5 or 6 years, but in the end, at each time, the boss and the company lost. But every time they lost, they went on appeal, and we went on appeal as well. So in the end, the company lost big time, had to pay quite a lot of money to all the workers. And the lesson is, if you insulted on the job, if you are singled out and people make your race or your ethnic background an issue and associate with all the negatives, racist stereotypes, you can stand up and you can fight back. Either you can express your dissatisfaction and your objection in a polite way, or you quit and you say why you quit, you walk out. This case went on and became almost a legendary fight for many new Chinese immigrants in Montreal, because it's rare that you see newly arrived immigrants working in manual or manufacturing positions, standing up to the owner of a company, the president of a company that incidentally exports to China. And these people were ready to quit their job to come to contest racist conduct, open racist conduct. This is an example some of you may find quite common in businesses, in department stores, in grocery stores. We have a story of somebody going to a local Shopper Drug Mart, and she and her son were standing in line at the cash, and then in front of them there was an old couple, politely but quite loudly tells them to go to another line because we don't want to get the coronavirus from you people. The expression of you people. They didn't point with any fingers, but just said it in a very polite, shall we say, in a calm way. And she looks around and she sees that she's the only Asian or Chinese person standing in line with her son. So when you face this situation, what do? We hear a lot of stories of people being treated like that in department stores, in supermarkets, in shopping malls, often by unknown, and often in a very polite way, like, please don't get too close, you may give us COVID-19. Or sometimes they don't say anything, but the way they just move the body, you know that they don't want to be near you because you are Chinese or you look Chinese. If you feel that this kind of conduct is unacceptable and offensive, there are ways to deal with that. And one way to deal with that is don't talk back, don't insult them. You can go to either the manager or a private security guard and show your dissatisfaction, report the conduct to the manager or the private security guard, and ask for action. The action that the manager or the security guard can take is either come and talk to the couple and ask them if they don't apologize, they should leave the store. Or the other way is basically apologize to you on the store's behalf, and very likely the manager can either give you a special or a coupon, but the manager, more importantly, apologizes for the conduct of other customers. And usually managers would go up to those customers and say that you have no right to treat my Chinese or my Asian customer this way. But the lesson is, don't fight back, don't insult them when they insult you, but just you do the polite thing and you go and report them to the manager or the security guard, especially if you feel that your safety could be compromised by this kind of conduct. This is a case of an assault. By the way, our organization is next week will start featuring video testimonies of people who have been assaulted, either because sometimes it's an anti-Asian aggression, or sometimes they're assaulted by strangers and they have no idea why they're assaulted or who assaulted them. We have a case of a man walking to a local grocery store in the neighborhood, and somebody came up behind him and punched him on the back of his head. He fell, and in this case, they can use the word damn, excuse me for using the expression, because you may have heard the word damn chink. It's an anti-Chinese slur. This man fell to the ground. He saw the young man running away. It's a white male. He knows he's not badly hurt, but he's quite shaken up. And even till today, several months after, he's still shaken up. Because this aggression is not only about physical violence. It's foremost about the psychological violence. Psychological violence is as destructive, as dangerous as physical violence. Sometimes a physical injury can heal within a matter of days, but the psychological injury can last for much longer, especially when the victim doesn't do anything about it, or does not talk about it, or go seek help to deal with the psychological consequence of, in this case, what we call a hate-motivated assault. It's about violence, psychological and physical, and it's an act committed by a total stranger. So what we always do is to make sure that the act is reported to the police, because we want it to be accounted for. We want to make sure that the police has the proper data on hate-motivated assaults directed against Asian people. And we also want to make sure that when you report to the police, you get a file number, you get into the police system as a victim of crime, and accordingly, you can get access to crime victims' compensation benefits. They can pay for your loss of wages because of the injury, pays for your counseling, pay for drug costs if you need to buy medicine. And the Provincial Crime Victims Compensation Program is very important for many people who may experience injuries and can prevent them from going to work for many days, and as a result they may lose their salaries over that, or sometimes they may even lose their job. And this is one of the reasons why act of racist violence should be reported to the police by the victims, so that at least you get the help that you need if you're ever assaulted because of racial violence. So tonight we talk to you about hate-motivated crime. Sometimes we call it a racist crime, sometimes we call it a hate crime, or in this case, hate-motivated crime. Essentially, it's all the same thing. It's a crime or an act. It's any action or practice that violates the Criminal Code of Canada. The Criminal Code is a federal law that defines what a crime is, and it has all kinds of definitions in there. And when a crime is committed because of the motivation of hate behind it, and when hate is based on things such as race, ethnicity, gender, religion, disability, or sexual orientation, it becomes legally and officially a hate-motivated crime. So any crime in the Criminal Code of Canada that is motivated by hate based on those grounds can be considered a hate-motivated crime. And why it's important to consider a hate-motivated crime as such, because the law, the Criminal Code has said when it's a hate-motivated crime, then the prosecutor, in prosecuting the case, has to ask the judge for increase a more severe penalty. to be imposed on the accused or on the aggressor, because as a country, as a society, we have decided to make hate-motivated crime a more serious crime and therefore more deserving of a, shall we say, harsher and more severe penalty or sentence. Remember anything that, for example, if somebody punches you in the face, it's a crime. When somebody punches you in your face and say, go back to your country, go back to where you came from, that's a hate motivated crime based on your actual or your perceived ethnic or national origin. If somebody puts a graffiti on your wall, they say, we don't want immigrants here, or immigrants go home, that's a form of vandalism, which is a crime against property, motivated by xenophobia, the dislike of immigrants, of strangers. And lastly, when somebody they spit at you and say that you are, let's say you're Chinese, but they said you're Filipino and you're dirty, so they spit at you. So you say, hey, I'm not Filipino, I'm Chinese. It doesn't matter. It's still a hate-motivated crime because it's still based on race and ethnicity, that it's not yours, it's someone else's, but it's still based on race or the ethnic origin or background of the person group that person dislikes. So remember, if, for example, that you are attacked because they think you're an immigrant when you are not, it's still a hate-motivated crime based on, among the things, national origin. So there are also specific hate crimes banned or prohibited in the Criminal Code of Canada. And these articles in the Criminal Code have been around for a long time. One is more recent, and I'll explain a little more about that. The Criminal Code prohibits and makes it a crime to advocate genocide of identify a group, for example, go and exterminate such a group in such a group, or it makes it a crime to incite hatred in a public way. You're standing in the street, you go online, you promote hatred against an identified group, and you want to promote hatred in a very, very willful manner, a malicious manner, deliberate manner against a group. For example, you've seen how neo-Nazis say that, all people of color, and they use all kinds of bad words to refer to people of color, should be killed. They can be charged with incitement of hatred or advocating genocide of people who are not white. So the law defines the identifier group on the basis, again, of race, color, ethnic origin, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression. It's a new ground to designate people who are transgender, or mental or physical disability. There have been some crimes in some cities against homeless people. There have been some homeless people who are beaten, who are burned, or who are peed upon by strangers. And that's also a form of the hate-motivated crime. When somebody say that we should go out and exterminate or kill all homeless people, it can be a form of advocating hatred and genocide against a group of people, because in many ways, many homeless people have mental health issues. So they may fall under the category of mental disability. And the same thing for people who hate blacks, people who hate women, people who hate gays and lesbians. If they go out and advocate genocide or hatred, they can be charged under the specific section of the Criminal Code. If you are out there and you say that we should eliminate all communists, these provisions will not apply, because communism or a belief in communist ideology is a political opinion and it's not among the grounds listed here. You may be charged with something else, but not necessarily with these specific provisions. After 9/11, the government of Canada adopted Section 430 of the Criminal Code, which makes it a crime when it's vandalism or mischief directed at the religious property or a property of for use for religious purposes by a, for example, for Jews and Muslims, Buddhists. And that specific provision was basically inserted because of the fact that right after 9/11 there were a lot of mosques that were sort of vandalized through different kind of crimes, and so this provision was made there too, because it's one way for the country to recognize that hate-motivated mischief or vandalism is basically, it's so bad that we need a law to specifically prohibit it. You hear a lot about harassment these days. You may hear a lot about sexual harassment. You may hear about psychological harassment, but racial harassment is also a major problem. Many of the examples I described to you earlier can be about racial harassment. Because what is racial harassment? Is any behavior, conduct, or practice from a person or group or in an organization that is hostile, it's humiliating, that is offensive, it's threatening, it's unwelcome, and when it's directed at you because of who you are, your race, your ethnic or national origin, can be your religion, if your religion is so visible, or sometimes because of your citizenship status, or real or perceived. For example, you are third generation Chinese, but in the eyes of some, you're just fresh off the boat. And that perceived status as a newly arrived immigrant is also a ground upon which we can use, with which we can use to define form of racial harassment. And more importantly, racial harassment, what it does, it creates a toxic environment, poison environment. And it can be, how can one create a poison work environment? It can be verbal abuse, jokes, insults, name calling. In schools, mostly it's about bullying and intimidation, or sometimes making threats, especially threats online. And as I mentioned earlier, we're talking about vandalism, destruction of property, and graffiti, and physical and psychological violence and abuse. It can take many forms. And more importantly, one of the things about racial harassment is sometimes when you deal with explicit racial harassment, you know it right away. But when you deal with sometimes less openly hostile, less explicit form of harassment, you don't know it, but the effects will be the same. One of the effects of racial harassment is fear. You feel depressed. You lose your self-esteem. You lose the sense of dignity, your sense of being a first class, a full citizen, and you just feel like you need to hide or you just stay in a corner as a way to avoid unpleasant and hostile conduct. So the racial harassment can be isolated, it can be repeated, infrequent, or it can happen once. A single act can constitute an act of racial harassment. One of the things that I mentioned is that all human rights laws in Canada, in all provinces and in all territories and at the federal level, prohibits racial harassment as a civil rights violation. And civil meaning it's not criminal, and civil means often in areas such as employment, housing, education, health and social services, or in any other commercial establishments or public institution, then you experience racial harassment, you consider that as a violation of your civil rights, and you can file a complaint with the Human Rights Commission. But there's another kind of harassment that can be criminal harassment, and that's also prohibited by the criminal code. It doesn't say criminal racial harassment. It just says criminal harassment. And criminal harassment, you may have seen some movies, is about stalking. It's about, for example, you follow a person from place to place, and you can talk about engaging, threatening conduct, things such as you keep following the person anonymously every night. You keep sending the person anonymous emails, or sometimes you follow and you wait for the person in front of his work or her work, and you follow that person home, and you basically try to communicate with a person in a way that intimidates a person, and that's criminal harassment, especially when it leads to the person to fear for his or her own safety. And usually this kind of criminal harassment occurs often in male and female relationship, when usually the relationship has ended, but the man continues to stalk, to follow, and to harass the women, to the point where the woman has to report to the police because it becomes like an obsession that compromises a person's privacy, a person's freedom of movement, and a person's, even we call it, you know, ability to live life, to go to work, to be at home without a fear of being harassed. And criminal harassment in the old days is mostly known as stalking. So now, if you know a little bit more about what these practices are and what the law can do towards these practices, what do you need to do if you are a victim of racial harassment or you're a victim of racial assault? Well, you have a couple of choices. First is you need to know and you need to accept that you've been assaulted or harassed because of who you are, your race, you being a Chinese, or even you look Chinese. You need to talk about it with family and friends, particularly with trusted friends. Sometimes you don't talk to friends you think are friends but who you can't trust, because gossip can start flying, and sometimes gossip will be as bad as the real thing. You need to document it. Either you can record the incident with your smartphone, you can take a picture, and you keep a record of it, because later on if something happens, you have a record, and it's important. And then you can consult professionals such as lawyers, social workers, teachers, and ask them very confidentially and privately what should be done. Because sometimes a situation can occur, you think it only happens to you, but the more you talk to people, the more you realize it's not as isolated. It's more common, and when you're united, you can create the strength in numbers. The more people talk about it, the more the problem will be confronted. But if ever that when you feel that your safety is in danger, you got to act fast. Don't wait for to get worse. Uh, in different setting, how do you deal with harassment or assault? One way to do it, especially as a coworker, a neighbor, somebody you know, just let the person know you don't appreciate harassment, that this harassment is offensive, that this harassment violates your rights, and if you want to do that in a very calm and polite way, make sure that you can be accompanied by a witness, so that at least you have someone to be a witness and even to protect you. If you are physically or psychologically threatened, you can run away, you can walk away, and then call for help. Okay? If you are assaulted or physically attacked, you can use reasonable force to defend yourself, but don't beat that person more than you need to, because it's about defending yourself, not defending and counterattacking that person with excessive force. And then if you know or you see someone who's committing an act of harassment and assault, you can quietly report them to the authorities without disclosing yourself. You can write anonymous email, you can make anonymous phone call, dial star 67, and you can dial 911 to report it, but you need to report it. You need to help report an act of assault or a crime, a hate-motivated crime, because when you report, you may be contributing to a lot of positive things, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes. What you should not do is, when you're racially assaulted and harassed, is first, don't accept it. Don't take it lying down. Don't ignore it, but don't confront your harasser, especially if your harasser is bigger than you. They are more people harassing you than just yourself, and don't retaliate. For example, if somebody uses a racist word to call you, don't call them back with a racist word, because then you'll be also breaking the law if you use a racist word towards someone when that person uses a racist word towards you. Okay? And if you want to report to the police or to any public authority, my suggestion to you is don't go alone. Always have a friend or a family member who can accompany you as a witness, and more importantly, as a source of support. Because sometimes dealing with public institutions that don't understand people like you and people like me, or minorities, it can be a very frustrating experience. So when you have a witness that or somebody next to you, that person can help explain, can help talk to the authority person, or even can help push for a better respect and better recognition of you as a person who wants to report uh, act of racism, because there are people out there who still believe that there's no racism. So no matter how much you want to talk about racism or you want to report about acts of racism, some authorities still want to or still pretend that doesn't exist and it's not a big issue. One of the things that I need to tell you is don't verbally threaten or swear. Sometimes a threat can be a simple thing, especially if you're religious. Don't say that, may God punish you, or I hope God will punish you for what you just did. Because when you say it to someone, it can be seen as a death threat, and you can be charged with a criminal offense. And don't threaten somebody with an object if you're not defending yourself. For example, somebody coming and wanted to punch you, and you grab a baseball bat to basically push the person back or even to hit the person. That could be, you can be charged with a worse crime than just basically defending yourself. Don't provoke, don't respond with force, and don't tell your family or friends to go teach them a lesson, because that could be considered a form of incitement to violence or incitement to commit a criminal act. So I'm getting a little bit more towards the end and say that if you're a victim of racial assault and harassment, what you can do is the couple of things you want to do before you take any kind of action. You have to be ready, and you have to talk to friends and family for support. Because when you take action, going to court, you sue, you file a human rights complaint, it can be a long, long process, a year or two. You may get discouraged, but you need to know that this process is long, it's complicated, it's not easy. You may need to learn about your rights, of course, but you also need the tips for protecting yourself and others, because sometimes when you report on a criminal act, you may be called as a witness in court, and you have to identify yourself so the accused may know who you are, and his or her friends may know who you are, so you may feel that your own safety is at risk. Of course, you always need to protect yourself from retaliation or reprisals, because especially if you want to denounce racism at work, you know that the friends who is racially harassing you can turn around and make your life miserable later in the same workplace. So you need to weigh what we call the pros and the cons. Should I or shouldn't I? So how you understand the system, who you have to support you, will make a difference as to what kind of action you can take, or even whether you should take any action at all. What kind of action can you take? I have listed here a series of things. You can file a civil rights complaint, such as a human rights complaint to the commission or to a human rights tribunal. You can go to court and sue in a civil court. You can file a complaint with the police if you believe that a crime has been committed. Or if you're at work and you're unionized, you can ask that your union file a grievance on your behalf, usually against the employer, because the employer either allows people to harass you, or that the employer actually, as an organization, harasses you because of who you are. And you can also look at the possibility of going public with media publicity sometimes. Can be a very powerful tool to push back on the harassment or the act of assault based on your race. again, you have to weigh the pros and the cons. You have to ask yourself, am I ready to engage and take legal action over the next several months or a year or two in order to obtain justice and to achieve a better respect for myself and for others of my community? I'm getting to the end. Many people have said, so look, if racism is so bad, is the system is so complicated, it's the risk, it takes so long, why should I do anything? I might just keep quiet and pretend it doesn't exist, it doesn't affect me, and hopefully it will go away. It's just like saying that about your, let's say that you have a problem with your toothache. If you're not going to do anything, it's not going to go away, it's going to get worse. So you need to really say to yourself, I'm going to say no to hate and racism and to violence, right? And how do I say it? I stand up for my rights and my community, members of my community, and their civil rights. I will stand up for the, in the name of Canadian citizenship. I'm a first-class citizen. Why should I take this as if I'm always a foreigner or always an immigrant? I'm not. Even if you're a naturalized citizen, you're still a citizen just the same, and you have full rights and, shall we say, liberties and other privileges as any other Canadian or native-born citizen. And when you speak out, you'll be surprised to know that when you speak out, you speak up, you feel very empowered. And you can reclaim your dignity, what we call the place in the sun, and you feel pride. When I helped those dozen Chinese workers at Caligo, that company, who stood up and talked back at the boss who was making all kinds of racist statements, a lot of people, and I think it's very, very fundamental to a lot of Chinese and all Asian cultures, is the notion of your honor, pride, dignity. And you cannot let anyone step on your sense of honor, especially your Chineseness, being Chinese, being Asians. It's your honor. It's the honor not of yourself, not only of your family, but the honor of your entire community, of the entire nation. So by standing up, we're talking about being empowering and empowering oneself, empowering others in the community. And in so doing, you also help send a message that there is a price to pay to be racist, to be violent, racism and violence. So we stand together, we speak loud in one voice or in many voices, and in so doing, what we do is reaffirming personal, community, and sometimes racial pride and honor, and it helps. It makes you feel better, and it feels that you regain the ownership and you've placed as a full-fledged Canadian citizen in this country. So I'd like to leave you on that note, and I would like to say that after helping those Caligo Chinese workers of so many years, many of them are in the 40s, by the way. They came here as engineers in their countries and professional, but they had to end up working in a manufacturing plant. So for them, it was a step down, but they never allowed the honor and their pride to be taken away because of racism. So when they stood up, it's about being proud who they are. So I hope that when you face racism, racial assault and harassment, you always stand up for your pride and your dignity, and more importantly, for your constitutional rights as a citizen of this country. So thank you very much, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much for a very informative and practical workshop. Now we'll open the floor for some questions. If you do have questions, there is a Q&A at the bottom. You just click there and type your questions. You can type in Chinese or English, and we'll send the question to Fo. And Fo, if you could stop sharing the screen. Yeah. So
Okay.
You mentioned a lot of cases. The sense I get is, in general, you try to avoid confronting the harasser, right? Uh, how about
That's right.
if you feel pretty sure that you can handle them physically, and you feel strongly you want to be firm, you want to confront, how would you do that? What kind of language can people use to confront that?
Well, sometimes you don't talk back,
Mm.
especially if you know that you're outnumbered. If you know that you're small and your opponent, your bullying the person is bigger than you know that you're not going to get a chance to fight back. So sometimes, we call it the I'm not saying that do the Bruce Lee sort of approach, but you try to be patient, be calm, and try to walk away. You can keep a note, or you can take a picture, but you do it discreetly, just to not to escalate the situation, because you want to talk back, you escalate, and next thing you know, it can get to the level of physical violence. And this is an advice specifically for seniors and for women, as when they're physically intimidated or harassed either in the streets or in the stores.
I mean, there are so many forms of microaggression, on the street, in store. So is there any, any case that you can, uh, you know, uh, confront the person, or just under any circumstance you just leave the place?
Well, it happens in the store, but the best thing I suggest is either you talk to a store employee, or the private security guards, because these days, because of COVID-19, you always have somebody acting as a guard at the gate to make sure that people sort of clean their hands and wear a mask. Or you can come and ask to talk to the manager. You need to get other people on your side in order to confront a bullier, or somebody a harasser in a shop, in a store, because businesses also have the legal right to protect you as a customer from harassment and possible violence. So you always try to ask for others to help you, to support. You can do it quietly, in a way that does not really confront your harasser.
Yeah, because you mentioned earlier, many times about your dignity and your pride, right? I mean, I have a friend, she was walking her dog, and this neighbor, this white old lady, basically yelled at her, go back to your country, the coronavirus, etc. That was very shocking to her. You know,
Mhm.
this is, from an old lady. Apparently, she was physically actually less strong than my friend, and she just felt very, very insulted and very upset. She did speak back and basically overshouted that lady. So I'm just wondering if there's certain occasions you can actually be strong and firm and actually uh, verbally teach somebody a lesson.
Yes, I mean, it's very emotional, right? Because
Yeah.
it's when you're assaulted, it goes to the core of who you are. It's a very natural, emotional, very natural psychological reaction. That's why I said sometime with a little bit of zen, with a little bit of discipline, we try to keep calm, and sometimes it's not worth talking back,
Mhm.
but does not prevent you from walking away and call 911 if you feel that your safety is jeopardized. Remember, if you feel that your safety is threatened, that you should call the police right away, especially in your street, especially if you're alone, because usually it can start with just an insult or a racist joke, but sooner or later it can escalate in something very physical, pushing, spitting, or punching or
Mhm.
kicking, and those are basically criminal acts.
So the bottom line is not to escalate if the result may be worse. You may ask, you may escalate things into more than you can handle, right?
Yes, look, it depends a lot on what you think you're capable of. When I was, I have a brown belt in karate. So when I'm surrounded by two, three people who want to beat me, I know I can fight them. But if they have 5 to 7 people, I know I'm not going. My karate is not going to help me a lot. So I know my limits, and I know discipline, and also I know when to be smart, and how to basically get out of a dangerous situation as much as you can. Then I can still report it.
Let's see. Now, before we close, do you have any final words you want to let people know?
I'm sorry?
Any final words to our audience?
No, it's that I think that it's important for Chinese and Asian Canadians to, first of all, to take racism very seriously. You are affected by it even when you don't know it. And you should not be silent and should not be afraid in reporting it and standing up against it. If you don't want to speak out, you can help other people speak out. You can donate to an organization that supports anti-racism work. There are many ways to do, but just do not stay indifferent because there's nothing to fear but fear itself. So if one is very proud who one is, one should really stand up and speak out against racism and hatred.
Thank you. That's a very good takeaway. That is to do something, anything that you can to help stop racism. So with that, thank you very much and for the audience, thank you very much too for attending this webinar. And our next one will be next Monday, November the 2nd. That one will be on hate crime and police. We will also talk a little bit about personal safety and property safety. So please do come back for this next webinar. I look forward to seeing you there. So good night, everybody. Thank you for attending and have a great evening. Goodbye now.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, take care. Okay.